Hello YouTube, this is Umels03. In the previous lesson, we were looking at something called the contains magic method, right? We've already studied a great deal of dunders, a lot of magic methods like length and get item and set item and add and less than, right? And they're basically different operations that we can use with instances of a class as though they were some other data type, like a dictionary or a function, right? We also talked about the call magic method, which is a special one that allows you to treat an instance of a class as though it were a function, kind of like the get item or the set item dunder would allow you to treat an instance of a class as though it were a dictionary that you could get values out of or change the values from, change the values of. So anyway, what we're going to do is we also in the previous lesson talked about the keyword and also how there's an iskeyword function provided by the keyword module, which basically accepts a string and it'll tell you true if that's a particular keyword in Python. And we said that keywords are words that cannot be used as variable names because they have very special meanings in Python, like class and import and false and def, right? And there's a couple other ones like true. So anyway, hopefully in return. So hopefully that's clear to you. So we're going to go ahead and import the keyword module so that we can go ahead and review that functionality in this video. But we're basically going to be doing some review of object-oriented programming. And then I also wanted to tell you about running a module as a script and what does it mean to do that. So hopefully that's clear. But anyway, we're going to say import keyword and then we're going to define a class called person. I think this is an example that we had many videos ago. But we're going to do a little bit of tuple unpacking to assign the can speak and the can fly class variables both to false. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have a constructor that accepts two parameters. And so it says define init and then it accepts two parameters. So it says create an instance of the person class by assigning name and age instance variables to the two parameters passed in. And we said that it's good etiquette in computer programming and it's going to push you more forward in software engineering if you can get into the habit of writing descriptive doc strings, which are just comments that go underneath the function header that describe what the function does, what it accepts, and what it returns. And so here we go ahead and declare and initialize, or I guess we just initialize two strongly private instance variables called name and age. And we know that they're strongly private instance variables because they have two underscores before them. And we said in a previous video, I think in lesson 38, that strongly private instance variables cannot be called directly from outside of the class. So the solution is to use what's called a property. So we can say define name, and then basically this function name coincides with the name of the strongly private instance variable. And this is a property method that would enable you to return the value of a strongly private instance variable. So we just say returns and then the name of the person instance, right? And then you could also have a setter method for the name where you say, at name.setter, right? These yellow things are called decorators, right? But you have an at name.setter decorator, like the instance variable name dot setter, and you just put that directly above the function header, and then you say define name, and you have to pass in one input, right? Self is not an input. Self tells Python that it's an instance method, but there's only one input W, and it says setter method for changing the value of a strongly private instance variable, and the one parameter is W, which is the new name for the person. You could say self.name equals W. And then we can also have a static method that goes ahead and returns the age of an instance, right? And so what we're going to do, so we have a property and a setter method for name, but we're not going to have those for age. Instead for age, what we're going to do is create a static method that accepts a person instance and returns their age, which is otherwise a strongly private instance variable. So you could say basically person.getAge of, and then you pass in an instance of the person class and it would spit out their age, right? So you parameterize a person whose age to return and it returns the age of that person. So hopefully that's clear to you. And then we can also have a few other ones, right? So we can have a have birthday method. It's an instance method that's called on a particular instance and it just increases their age by 1. So presumably the age instance variable has to be numeric because we're trying to add a 1 to it. And then if we say define give wings, basically we could say that that's an instance method to change a boolean instance variable. So we could give a particular person wings. So we could say self.canFly is true because otherwise self.canFly is false, because we said that when an instance of a class is created, its instance variables will coincide with the class variables. Like for that particular instance, they won't be able to speak or fly, but you could go ahead and change that with this method right here. So you could say give wings and say self.canFly is true, and it would only change the value of the canFly variable for that particular instance, not for the class as a whole. And then there's also a class method. So class method, you feed in basically CLS. I don't think it has to be CLS, but CLS is by convention. And you could say give everyone wings. This would change a Boolean class variable. It would update the value of that variable for every instance of the class. You would say CLS.canSpeak equals true. So that would just go ahead and give everyone a voice, right? And then you could say define call. So then defines what it means to call an instance of the person class as though it were a function. So by default, assign t to 1 unless the user specifies it. But it accepts a parameter, which here I'm saying will represent the number of times to print the instance of the class according to the str magic method, which is going to be discussed right here. But we could say for q in range of t, print self. So that means if we create an instance of the class, like x equals person of Tom and 33, and then we just say x of 4, like x of 4. So we treat x, the instance, as though it were a function. When we feed in an input, it would say for q in range of 4, print x, like print the instance of the class. Well, what does it mean to print an instance of a class? Well, you look at the str magic method. This is a string representation of an instance of a class. Well, where will print their name and then is and then age and then years old. And so that would do that t many times if you go ahead and call the instance of the class. And then we also talked about the contains magic method, and we said defines y and p for some instance p, return true if and only if the person can both fly and speak. So here the contains magic method doesn't really depend on what y is, right? We don't end up using y in this function definition. We'll just return true if that particular instance of the person class can fly and if they can speak. But if they cannot do either one of those, or if there's one of those that they can't do, then we'll return false, right? But what we're going to do, so we could see some examples of that, and I just want to show you a couple of examples here. So what we could say A equals person, and then we could say of Abby, and then we could say 21. Okay, and then so what we could do is we could just say basically print of a.name, and so this basically uses the property method for name, because name is a strongly private instance variable, and that would otherwise make it hard to grab the value of it. So then if we go ahead and run it, we get Abby, right? And then what if we said print of person.getAge of A, right? And so this would basically be looking at the getAge method, and that's a static method. So you call it on a particular class, but you have to feed in an instance of the person class whose age you want to return. And so that would go ahead and return 21 on the next line. So hopefully that's clear to you. And then we could also say, what if we say something like person dot give everyone voice, okay? And so hopefully that's clear to you how that works. And then we could also say a dot give wings, And then what if we say print of 100 in A? So then we could basically say, remember we said that the contains magic method for this particular example just returns true. It doesn't really matter what element you're trying to see is in the instance. We're just going to return true if that instance can fly and can speak. So hopefully that's clear to you. But if we say 100 in A, then that would go ahead and say true, right? But then if we go ahead and remove the wings, right? And so now Abby doesn't have wings. Now she can only speak. And so now if we go ahead and run it, it says false. So hopefully that's clear to you how the contains magic method works. It's just another example. And usually you'd want to use the instance, right? Like in our example of the stack or the queue class, we said that an element was in an instance of the stack or the queue if it was in the list that implemented or represented the stack or queue. So that would be a more popular, a more formal definition, but you can return any Boolean that you want. I guess one of the things that we can also say is that the contains magic method, this function, is always instructed to return a Boolean, so true or false, okay? And that's always going to be true for the contains magic method. It's always going to be true or false. So hopefully that's clear to you, but that's how the contains magic method works. And then what if we basically say a of 7? So then this would be treating an instance of a class as though it were a function. You have to use the call magic method. And so if you say a of 7, it would say for q in range of 7, print, and then the name of the instance variable, and then is, and then the age of the instance variable, and then years old. So it would print that out 7 times on the console. So you get that 7 times. So hopefully that's clear to you. what we're going to do is think about the keyword function again. So we said define keyword function. It's a static method which creates a lambda function that shows the operation of the iskeyword function provided by the keyword module. So it's a static method. You need a static method decorator, and that means that you call it directly on the person class because this keyword function is defined within the person class. But basically we're going to say a equals lambda s keyword dot is keyword of s. So it will just tell us if these words are keywords, right? We said we imported keyword at the top, and so we're just going to figure out whether each of these methods are keywords. So what we're going to do is we're going to say person.keyword function. Okay, it's a static method, and so that means that you just call it on the particular class. You say person.keyword function. And we could go ahead and take a look at what we get here. So is def a keyword? Yes, it's how you define a function. Is lambda a keyword? Yes, it shows up in orange. Is print a keyword? No, it shows up in like purple. It's a very popular function in Python, but it's not a keyword. Okay, while is a keyword, if is a keyword, filter is not a keyword. Remember when we were talking about functional programming, we talked about a generator called filter of predicate iterable, but that's not a keyword. Okay, itertools is a package, it's a module, it's not a keyword. Okay, except is a keyword. Okay, when we do exception handling, we need except, and that shows up in orange, that's a keyword. But then static method is not a keyword. That's something that we would put on top of a decorator. Okay, and then call is not a keyword either. That's an example of a magic method, but keywords are only the words that show up in orange, and you can go back to the previous video if you want to take a look at the full list. And then we can also have a class method. So we said in lesson 39 that static methods and class methods are pretty darn similar, but with class methods, you need to specify CLS, right? And so presumably you could use a class method to go ahead and update the values of one of the class variables. I think we did that with give everyone voice, right? And so that's a class method. But another class method, we could say class method which creates a lambda function that shows the operation of the type function. So we're going to say b equals lambda s print of type of s. So this is not a lambda function that returns anything, it just prints something. And so we're going to say b of q colon equals and then a tuple with 45110. So anyway, let's just go ahead and run it. So we're going to say person.type function. And so class methods are similar to static methods because you also call them directly on the class. But basically what we're going to do is we could say b of q colon equals and then this tuple, and that would be a tuple, right? And then what if you say q equals list of q and then b of q? So that would be a list. And then you say q equals set of q, b of q, that would be a set. Q equals frozen set of q, b of q, that would be a frozen set. What if you do b of 682 over 5? Well, that would be a float because we said that an integer divided by an integer in Python gives you the perfect, floating point number. It gives you the actual number, but that would be a float. It would be a floating point number. And then 682 over 5, that's the floor division, so that would be an int. What about string of 682? That would be a string. What about bool of 0? That would be a bool. Okay, that would be a boolean. And then what about u equals person of Tom and 33? So it creates an instance of the person class. And then b of u, well, it tells us that it's an instance of the person class. So it says class person. So hopefully that's clear to you. What we're going to do in this video is talk about running a module as a script. And so basically what we're going to do is we realize that all of the methods in this person class, like all of the code that we've written in this person class, happens in the context of a function. It happens in the context of some modular code that we can go ahead and decide to call, right? We can go ahead and decide to call any of these functions. But what we're going to do is we're going to learn, and we can basically say if all of your code is embedded in functions, you can go ahead and run your module as a script. And so basically what we're going to do is we're going to say basically if, and then we're going to say name equals, and then we're going to say main, and you have to spell it like this. But basically what this allows you to do is it lets you create an if statement where you can execute any of the code that you want to execute. So let's go ahead and run this keyword function again, right? So we could basically say person.keyword function. And basically this is called running a module as a script. And basically it just goes ahead and makes a call to any of the functions in your class in any order that you like. And so you can see a play button in the PyCharm IDE. There's a play button there, and that means that whenever you call the run method, it's going to go ahead and execute this code. So it's just going to start at line 121, and that's what's going to be executed by the interpreter. So then if you go ahead and run, then it just goes ahead and runs the keyword function. And we just got a bunch of true or falses depending on whether those words in Python were keywords. And we said that keywords are the words with special meanings that show up in orange. So hopefully that's clear to you. But this is just basically how you run a module as a script, right? And then you could also do something else. So you could say print of list of map of type. And then what if we say 6 2 6 2, and then we'll say frozen set of the tuple 6 2. So then let's think about what would happen here. So it says print of list of map of type. So this, we talked about the map of function iterable. And so map of function iterable is a generator that accepts a function. Remember, type is a function, and an iterable. So it looks like this is an iterable, right? It's a tuple with different elements in it. And it looks like there's a couple of ints, but there's also a tuple within the tuple. And then it looks like there's a frozen set within the tuple, but we could go ahead and print out the list representation of the map, because we said that you can't just print a generator, but you can either iterate through the elements in the generator using a for loop, or you can convert it to a list or a set or a tuple. So hopefully that's clear to you. So then you can go ahead and run it, and it just tells you the list. So it says class int, class tuple, class frozen set. Okay, and so what if you said print set of map of type? So now, since you have two ints, we said that sets can only have unique elements. So now if we go ahead and run it, we're only going to have one class int. So hopefully that's clear to you. But the point is that you can go ahead and run your module as a script, and this is where it would start. And so this is the line of code that you would write to start your program at a particular place if all of your code is inside functions that would otherwise have to be called, right? And so you can go ahead and call them in the context of this if name equals main. And we have a Python enhancement proposal saying that there should be one space between the hashtag and the capital T. But you can decide whether or not you're going to let that bother you. And if you don't want to let it bother you, you would go ahead and hover over, right? And then you could go ahead and say more actions, and you could say ignore errors like this. That's your discretion. But you could go ahead and you can do all kinds of examples with this, right? So we can go ahead and create another person. So then we say person of Tom and 81, okay? And then what if we say K, what if we just say K? So then this would be calling on the call magic method, but here we're not passing in a parameter for T. So it would take the default value of 1. It would just print the string representation of this instance of the person class one time, and it just says Tom is 81 years old, right? What if we say K.have birthday, right? And then it would say Tom is 82 years old, because the value would be incremented from 81 to 82. But the point is that you can have your testing code. This is kind of like a sandbox, right? But this is like a sandbox. It's like almost like a main method. But you just go ahead and write if underscore underscore name underscore underscore equals equals, and then you'll have double quotes underscore underscore main underscore underscore double quotes, and then colon. And then this is going to be the code that will run as a script, and it allows you to run this particular module, this sup.py, as a script. And you can decide which of the functions you want to call them, in what order, and what inputs do you want to pass in to those particular functions. And so I don't know, I think we're kind of driving this home a little bit more than we have to, but hopefully you are getting familiar with these different instance variables and just these different fundamentals of object-oriented programming, right? What if we say UK, so we could do some tuple unpacking with person instances, right? So what if we say person of Toby and 16, and then we could say person of Kevin and 31. And so this would be tuple unpacking. This would be tuple unpacking for two person instances, and you could have as many of them on the same line as you want. But then what if you say print of k.name? And so that would basically give you Kevin, right? I think I accidentally hit debug, but then if we go ahead and run it, we get Kevin, right? So hopefully that's clear to you. And then we also talked about string methods. So now we can just review other things, but print of u.upper. So this is a method. I guess not u.upper, but you'd have to say u.name.upper, right? So hopefully that's clear to you, but you could go ahead and call a string method on a particular string. But the point is that you just go ahead and I guess I was probably putting that in the wrong place, but you could go ahead and run a module as a script. You say if name equals main and then whatever code you want to execute. So we'll talk more about that in the next video, but hopefully that was interesting to you. From Emails03, thanks for watching and please subscribe.